Well, now I must leave now, but I really hope to see you tomorrow. Yeah. Well, my house.
Well, I really hope to see you tomorrow, folks. You never know around here. Thanks for listening to the GCN Radio Network. I'm Jack Blood, your narrator, your radio gun. You're listening to Deadline Live. On the program with us, Richard Andrew Grove from 8thestate.com. Richard also has some events that we want to promote before he gets done here, but we are right in the middle of a furious connecting the dots, following the money, painting the picture, putting the puzzle together, linking 9/11 with the events today, the economic 9/11, the problems, the reactions, the solutions, the evidence. We're naming names. I would assume, Richard, that Mr. Greenberg isn't too happy with us right now.
Before he wouldn't be happy with us, he'd have to be unhappy with, like, Peter Dale Scott, a professor of University of Southern California, or guys like Jerry Mazza, who's written several great articles exposing, you know, in literary terms, here's the evidence, here's the links, you know, read through it. You know, so it's not just us who's talking about this out there.
Yeah, I just get a little nervous that I might get a visit from Kroll. Let's go back to Elliot Spitzer. We cut you off there at the end, and I want to make sure people heard what you said. And then let's ask, you know, what happens to Kroll with this reshuffling of the financial deck and the bailout of the Fed, and who might control it. But let's go back to Spitzer and finish that up.
All right. So as we mentioned, Spitzer's in the motions of making an investigation. You know, AIG and Marsh counter by putting a guy who Spitzer has to basically acquiesce to. And so that whole investigation is a sham. And because of Spitzer, and, you know, it was him and Rudy Giuliani and Patrick Fitzgerald, and all these guys worked under New York City District Attorney Robert Morgenthau, who has been the District Attorney of New York since the French Connection. And therein you sort of have a group of people who learned that, yeah, there's drugs being traded and there's mob people involved, so they fake prosecute the mob. In essence, they do a merger. They merge with the mob, and when they say they dismantled the mob, and that's what Giuliani's credited for.
Yeah.
His dad was in the mob, and so when you understand the drugs are still coming in greater and greater numbers, and that, you know, the United States economy is laundering approximately $1 trillion through the stock market, and, you know, my second ordeal as a whistleblower when I tried to go back to work, I wanted to sell a piece of software that allowed companies to keep themselves from being taken advantage, and, you know, all these financial disgraces like Tyco and all that stuff could be avoided. And I was actually selling software that was supposed to prevent money laundering, and then discovered that software had a back door in it, that the SEC was approving of it, and then magically you have a mechanism to launder $1 trillion through companies without them even knowing it, because it's all being done technologically behind the scenes, which puts all these companies at risk, not just AIG and Lehman Brothers. I mean, but, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, that just underscores what we say on this program, that security is an illusion. There is no such thing as security, and there's always a way around it, especially when the very people who are using it or could be affected by it, could be taken down by it, are the very people that are creating it and controlling it and paying for it. Going back to Spitzer real quick, I think another point we need to make, knowing his connections to Kroll and their connections to AIG, again, alleged perpetrators involved with 9/11 financially and otherwise, in the security apparatus. I don't think it's too big of a stretch of imagination why the Attorney General, Elliot Spitzer, did not investigate 9/11 as a criminal act upon New Yorkers, no matter how much New Yorkers raised their voice and said, we want this, we care about this, you go do it. Pretty easy now to understand, you know, what he had at stake and why he was gatekeeping for the usual suspects.
Sure, and I discovered, one step deeper when I was going through my trial against my ex-employer, and the attorneys that I was up against was this company called Skadden Arps. And I didn't realize that until after I was in trial and I was in the final phases, but Skadden Arps was created by J.P. Morgan specifically to do deals that other attorney firms weren't willing to do. And Skadden Arps, managed the Iran-Contra deal. They managed BCCI and got these guys all off the hook. And Spitzer and his wife both worked for that law firm. And so when you have these things coming full circle, and I'm realizing this, that I'm pointing out money laundering, and who does the company go to get defense? This other company that's an attorney firm that's professionally there to obscure all these things from public view. They're also the same law firm that defends the airlines from the victims' families in 9/11. So when you have all of these things coming full circle so fast, it's a small group of elite people who just have access to information, and they're doing things that normal people on the street either can't comprehend or can't can't just believe. Their belief stops them. But if you take even one more step back, you look at BCCI, and one of the key figures in BCCI was this guy named Clark Clifford. Now, Clark Clifford, if you go back to the creation of the CIA and the OSS and National Security Act of 1947, Clark Clifford created national security, that term. And whenever that term is invoked, 90% of the time it's used to cover up the drug trafficking that is the backbone of our economy.
And AIG, of course, the allegations of them working with the CIA and smuggling dope. And, it really just all fits together so nicely. I don't know why we can't just tie a bow on it and start the subpoenas and the investigations.
Well, and there's so much information that it's even hard for me to represent in this short amount of time. But this is what we've been investing our time into behind the scenes, is connecting the money laundering. If you follow the money, you find the people who did all this. Because when AIG is crumbling and it's being bought up by the Federal Reserve, well, those are still the people who are behind 9/11. Those are the same people who created the currency, and that was because J.P. Morgan in the late 1800s and early 1900s bailed out this country 3 times, and then the people realized Wall Street has too much power. So these guys create a bank secretly, and they tell people, hey, this is federal, it has a reserve. Everyone buys into it. J.P. Morgan then creates the Council on Foreign Relations to put editors in all the newspapers, and therefore they've controlled our media for the past 80, 90, 100 years.
It doesn't help that General Electric makes profit off of the wars that they're selling in order to continue their domination. Another connection into 9/11 with Maurice Hank Greenberg. He was deeply involved in the Chinese trade. And by Chinese trade, we pretty much mean heroin, but it means other things too. In the 80s, where one Henry Kissinger was one of his representatives. And of course, Henry Kissinger, they attempted to appoint him as the head of the 9/11 Commission until the Jersey girls started asking questions about his client list in Saudi Arabia.
And I would point out that L. Paul Bremer also worked for Kissinger Associates. So these guys, it's a small clique of people who've worked together behind the scenes, and they're just doing things that are beyond public awareness. And once you put the spotlight there and explain what's going on, it might not be the sexiest information, but it follows the money, it has real SEC documents behind it, and you can get to perpetrators who were profiting from the deaths on 9/11 and the war.
Why don't you just believe in all of these coincidence theories stacked on top of each other by the millions? What's wrong with us, Richard? Why don't we just buy into all these coincidence theories and then just give up all of our freedoms and go work for minimum wage somewhere? I mean, why aren't we just going with the program here?
Because I realize that by people invoking plausible denial, that they create an illusion. And anytime somebody's hiding or censoring a piece of information from you to keep you from figuring it out, it means they want to make you ignorant to profit from your apathy and laziness because you won't go look for yourself. And they have a maxim that says, let he who would be deceived be deceived. Meaning, if you're not smart enough to see that the three card money is a shell game and you're getting taken advantage of, if you find that entertaining, they're going to keep taking your money. And that's what we really have to do, is educate ourselves, turn off the TV, start reading some books, talking to each other, and learning some things from experience directly and not from the TV, because the TV is, based around profit. And profit depends on your ignorance, and that's how everything out there runs.
We got all of these names. Frank G. Wisner Jr., board member of Kroll, currently was Greenberg's deputy chairman of external affairs. His father was the founder of the CIA, who killed himself over the scandal from his being duped by British Soviet master spy Kim Philby. Frank Wisner Jr. is a director of George Bush-linked Enron. Now we go back to Enron, and then we go back to AIG and the negotiated payments from Peru over the nationalization of Enron operations. I mean, there's a lot of things they had to cover up. They were raping, they were pillaging, they wanted to continue doing that. They found the best way to do it is to have this new Pearl Harbor. Here are all the people that benefit. Here are their names. Here are their actions. We're following their trail. I want to come back. I want to, talk to Richard Grove about what happens to all of this now as this is in play. What can we do? What do we watch out for here? Richard Andrew Grove with us, just burning up the airwaves today, doing a fantastic job. 8thestate.com. Richard Andrew Grove will also talk about the events he's about to do. Stay tuned. I'm Jack.